There's been a ton of hype for the Sega Genesis Mini that's coming out this September, and a lot of people are very anxious to get their hands on it. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to make your very own Sega Mega Drive Mini using a Raspberry Pi and a really awesome new front end called BLAST16. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Alright guys, so recently a company called Tripware has developed a new front end for your Raspberry Pi that is not based off of Emulation Station. It's called BLAST16, and as I said, it is a front end emulator for your Raspberry Pi, and it is actually really neat. There's some hiccups with it, some things I don't like, some things I do like, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to get this loaded up onto your Raspberry Pi. And it actually is really cool that if you could do this build, you could load it up with a bunch of different Sega games on it, and then if you throw it into one of the MegaPi cases right over here by RetroFlag, it will essentially be a Sega Genesis Mini with whatever games you want to put onto it. Now, this build is very specific and is only for a handful of Sega Genesis consoles, so you won't be able to load things on it like Super Nintendo games, Game Boy games, or any other console essentially. So there is support, and we're gonna just scroll on down, and we can see over here that it says that it plays Mega Drive / Genesis games, Sega CD, Mega CD games, Mega Drive 32X, Sega 32X, Master System, and Game Gear. So that's going to be the extent of the different games that you can play. So you've got 5 different options there, and it's really neat that it's super easy to install. Down below on the page, you're going to get just a link to download the image, and as well as that, they'll even provide you all the different artwork that you need. So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. So as you can see here, it's powered by RetroArch, and it uses the Genesis Plus GX and the Pico Drive cores. Those 2 cores are really good cores. I've gone over those in some of my previous videos for the PlayStation Classic, and I've talked about them a little bit. They're pretty good cores. They run games really, really well. The important thing to notice is that for things like Sega CD, or any of the other consoles that require BIOS files, you are going to have to source those BIOS files and transfer them onto the build as well, but it's really easy and it doesn't take very much time. So again, I'll show you guys how to do that, but we're going to go ahead and move on. It says it's got a fast boot 15 seconds, so this is where I think that it's kind of negligible. It depends on it's going to depend on the type of SD card that you're using. I find that when you're using a low quality SD card, you run into much more problems in terms of the boot speed, so that's something to just keep in mind. It says in here that you can do everything from the front end with the controller. So one thing I want to mention is that it's pre-configured for a bunch of controllers. Things like an Xbox 360 controller will work right out of the box. You plug it in and it's already pre-mapped. Alternatively, you could go with something like this, and this right over here is the Retrobit officially licensed Sega controller that runs off of a USB port. This would be perfect for this build. If you already have one, or you're able to get your hands on this specific controller, or the blue one, I think it comes in a different color as well. There's a blue, almost like a transparent blue one. Definitely, if you can get your hands on these would give you the absolute best gaming experience. The controllers are very well made, they feel really good, and they feel very authentic to the original Sega Genesis controllers. So if you're looking for that, this is a good controller to use. But essentially, you could use almost any USB controller. You can pop it in, and if you need to configure it, if it's not pre-configured, you can go ahead and do that. And again, it's really easy to do that. So that's a really cool thing that they've got going on. Additionally, in this build, you've got something called Create a Favorites Game List. This will be handy, especially considering the way that this is built. There aren't subcategories. Everything is just displayed right on the home screen. So if there's a specific set of games that you like, you can tag them as a favorite game, and it'll automatically categorize those into a new section for you. So they'll still be available on the main display, but when you press up on the D-pad, it'll take you to a section that is specifically all the tagged games or all your favorites, and you have access to those really quickly as well. Bluetooth controller support is available. As most people know, the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus and the 3B have built-in Bluetooth, so you can connect in with a Bluetooth controller if you've got one, so that's always nice. It says multi-tap support, so games that require more than 2 controllers, or that have the ability to play more than 2 controllers, is available, and I'd imagine what you'd use for that is just a USB hub that you would pop into one of the USB ports. Or if you're using Bluetooth controllers, you sync up more than 2 controllers at a time. So that's really cool. It looks like what the developers have tried to do with this is allow you guys to do whatever you want to do right from the front end of the actual build. So rather than having to take your USB or your SD card out and pop it into your computer and edit things and delete games and remove games or go over the network, you can actually do it right from the front end. So if there's a bunch of games that you've loaded on and you're like, I don't really like those, want to get rid of them, you can actually delete them right from the front end. And I will show you guys all those options again when I do the demo at the end of this video. So alternatively, you can load, delete save states as well, and you only have 4 save states. And I say only, I'm not sure why I say only. 4 save states is more than enough in my opinion for any game, for any console. I definitely think that that's great. It's certainly better than the PlayStation Classic that came with only 1 save state, but it's more along the same lines as the SNES Classic or the NES Classic where you have multiple save states. So that's really great that the developers put that in there because a lot of people do appreciate that. So now we've got some screenshots, and this is just of the menu, things like that. Other features that are involved, you've got some background music, and it says written by Loop and Pixel, so that's already going to be pre-built onto it. You can change that if you want. It's relatively simple. Again, you would just load it onto your USB drive and pop it into the console and you're off. Compatible with the MegaPi Case reset and shutdown script, and I believe everything's preloaded for you. So the benefit of these cases, a lot of people think that they're just an aesthetic look, but they're not. So as you can see here, we've got an on button, and then we've also got a reset key here. The reason why it's important to have those there is because if you were to just shut down your Raspberry Pi by just unplugging it or killing the power, you can corrupt your SD card. So this is going to be handy because you have a reset key and an on-off key, and when you use either one of those, it will automatically implement a script that will allow you to shut down your Raspberry Pi properly. It'll back out of whatever it's in and put itself into a state where it's safe to shut it down without corrupting your SD card. So if you're using a emulation station build or a RetroPie build, you have to install a custom script, but it seems as though that script's already pre-installed in this software, so that's always nice. It's just ready to go right out of the box. So now going back, it says that it's easy to update, it's easy to copy games onto your USB drive. On boot, displays box art, which is really cool. If it doesn't find matching box art, it will display just like a generic box art, which is essentially just a white box with the name of it, with a cool little logo, or I guess a cool little bezel around it that matches whatever region of console you set your system up for. So that's nice. It says display different console logos, so again, that's going to be based off of your region. So if you wanted to have a UK or European region, the artwork that was released with the consoles back then was different. So the North American logo and the European logo and the Japanese logo, they're all different. So you have the option to completely customize that way. You can back up your system and you can restore your system right from within the build. And you can exit to command line, reboot, shutdown options that are all there for you as well. Other than that, now that we've kind of gone over the features and what's so cool about the build here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to download and install this build and get it up and running on your Raspberry Pi. So what you need to do, if you scroll down, or you can just press the downloads button, it'll take you to a section where you've got the latest builds. So you've got the SD card image, you've got changelog, and then you've got a user manual. You will not need to download everything. If you just download the SD card image, it will download everything that you need. It's a 1.25 gigabyte download file, which is fine. You can download it. It does take a few minutes, but once it's downloaded, you're good to go. So if we go down, we'll see that there's box art as well. So you've got right here Mega Drive Genesis box art, you've got Master System box art, Game Gear box art, Sega CD box art, and you've got the 32X box art. So whatever console you're choosing to do, you can download those as well. For my tutorial, I'm just going to show you guys really quickly how to do Genesis. I figured I'll stay in line with the Genesis Classic console, and I will only load up Genesis games, and what I'm planning to do is load up like 500, 600 games on there. So I'm going to have a very full, almost complete Genesis build. So again, you would download this. I've already pre-downloaded all these things. They're on my desktop. So So I'm not going to download them again, but literally all you got to do is just click on the download button and then download it. Click on the download for the SD card image and you're good to go. So the two you need is the SD card image and then any potential box art that you need. So now that that's all done, what I'm going to go ahead and do is minimize my web browser. And you can see I've got the files here. These are the ones I downloaded. Right over here is the build, and I've extracted it already. And when you extract, you're going to get these 4 files. You've got a BLAST16 user manual, which will come into handy if you ever want to do any tinkering. You've got the actual image file itself. You've got the license agreement, and you've got the README. The most important thing that we're going to need for the build itself is this file right here. This is your image file, and then the user manual is really handy. This is the Sega Mega Drive artwork that I've downloaded. I've extracted it into its own folder, so when you double click on it, you'll see in here all the different artwork for all the games is loaded up in here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. The first thing that we're going to need to do is have some sort of software to write images onto micro SD cards. So I use a software called Win32 Disk Imager, and I'll pull it up really quickly. Perfect. Now you can use whatever you want. I've seen a lot of people use Etcher, which is a great software. I just like Win32 Disk Imager. It's really simple. It's never really given me any problems, so I definitely am a big fan of it. One of the important things that you're going to want to make sure that you do is whatever you do when you're writing an image, make sure you are writing it to the correct drive. If you have a USB drive plopped in, or if you have multiple things connected in and you write to the wrong drive, you will override whatever it is on the different drive that you may not want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to verify that I've got a micro SD plugged into my computer. It's right over here, the SDHC boot I drive. So we just need to make sure that I select the I drive here. Next, we're going to click on this little folder button, and that's going to locate the file in which we are planning to write. So in this case, I'm going to go over to my desktop and I'm going to double click on this image file right over here. And you can see it's loaded up the image file. It's going to be written to drive I, which is going to be my micro SD card. And then I have a few options down over here. I've got read, write, verify only, and exit. Obviously, we don't want to exit. We're going to write. So we're going to go ahead and write that. It's going to ask, are we sure we want to do this? We're going to hit yes. And it's going to be on its way. So this will take a few minutes. My anticipation is for something like this, it's about a gig. You're looking at something like 5 minutes or so. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. And I'm going to talk to you guys about loading games onto the build as well. So while we are writing the image, we may as well prep our USB drive with whatever games we want and the image files. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pop our USB drive in, and I've already got mine in, and I've got it called Gigastone, so that's it. You don't have to have it formatted in any specific way. It can be FAT32, NTFS, exFAT, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, stock out of the box is fine. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create a few folders. So I've pre-created everything already, but right on the root of your drive, you're going to need a folder called BIOS. So in this case, you would just right click, new, folder, and then you would just label it as BIOS. But again, I don't need to do that because I've already done it. As well as that, you're going to need a folder called games. Inside your BIOS folder is where you're going to load any of your BIOS files. So you have to find them, whatever one it is that you're going to be using. Again, for Sega CD, there's specific BIOS files, and you just dump them into this folder. You don't have to put them in their own folder. You don't have to do anything special. You just throw them into that folder and you're good to go. When you go into the games folder, you're going to see I've got a bunch of subcategories here, or subfolders. So I've got 32X, I've got CD, I've got GG, I've got MD, and I've got MS. They have to be labeled this specifically. Obviously, 32X is for the Sega 32X, CD is Sega CD, GG is Game Gear, MD is Mega Drive, and MS is Master Systems. So you have to make sure that the folders that you create are specifically labeled this. Inside of each folder as well, so for example, if we go into the Master Systems folder, there'll be no games, but there'll also be another folder called Box Arts, and you have to make sure it's actually spelled Box Arts with an S. I had some problems with that. I would put in Box Art, and it's supposed to be Box Arts. So just a reminder there. And obviously this is going to be self-explanatory. Inside the MS folder, right inside here, you can load up all of your games. And inside the box art folder, you put all of your artwork. And I've already gone ahead and done that for the Genesis build, so the Mega Drive build. So if you click here, you can see all of my games are right inside here. And as I said, I loaded it up with pretty much every single one that I could find. And then inside the box arts folder, we've got all of our artwork here. And it doesn't matter if it's PNG or JPEG. In terms of that, it does not matter. The only thing that actually matters is that the name of the game is exactly the same as the name of the box art. And when I say exactly the same, I mean literally exactly the same, including capitalization. If you've got a game called, I don't know, let's say Six Pack, and it's 6-PAK with a capital P as the image, and the game itself is labeled 6-PAK with a lowercase p, it will not match them. You will end up with a problem. And it looks like my image file is done. The write is successful, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. So as I was saying, it literally has to be identical in every way. What I found the easiest way to do is go to your Mega Drive folder, pick your game. So Real Monsters, I'm going to open up the edit. I'm going to copy the name exactly as it is. I'm going to go to the box art, and I've got to find Real Monsters, and I just paste it in there. I hit enter, save it, and it's good to go. So again, super duper important that it is exactly the same. Everything has to match, and if it doesn't, you will not get the box art to transfer over. This is one of those things I'm not really a big fan of. I hate how hyper specific it has to be. It's unfortunate that they don't have some sort of database in there where it can identify the games and match them up, but I also understand that that's a lot of work, and this is a single group developer, so what they've done is really awesome so far. It's a small little nitpicky thing, but this is definitely something I wanted to give you guys a heads up about. So as I said, we've gone ahead and loaded up our USB drive with a BIOS folder, and inside I don't have any BIOS files because the Genesis doesn't require one, but if you are looking for a different console that requires it, you load them up into the BIOS folder. Inside games, you've got 32X, CD, GG, MD, MS. They have to be labeled like this, and within each folder, you're going to load your games, and you need an additional folder called Box Arts with an S, and inside that folder, you will have your artwork that matches exactly the name of the ROM. Other than that, you are good to go. What we need to do is we need to take our micro SD card that is finished loading out of our PC, load it up onto our Raspberry Pi, power on the Raspberry Pi, and let it load up for the first time. We're going to get an error saying that you are using a previous build or something like that and you have to reboot. Totally fine, and I will show you guys that on screen. You turn off your console, unplug it in this case, plug it back in, and it should boot up for the first time. And we're going to go ahead and do that now. Let me just make the switch over to my Raspberry Pi. Alright guys, so this is the screen that I was talking about just a minute ago. So if you see on the bottom it says rereading the partition table failed, device or resource busy, please reboot. This is completely normal if this is your first time installing. You may not always get this error, but I'm going to say that 80% of people who are doing this will probably get this error. So all you have to do at this point is take your USB drive that we loaded our games and our image files onto. We're going to pop that into one of the ports on the Raspberry Pi. We're just going to power off the console, and then we're going to power it back on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we're going to see what happens next. Just give me one sec here. Alright guys, so as you can see here, there's a lot of data that's being transferred. So what's happening is the software is instructed to pull all of the image files and all the games and any BIOS files that you've loaded onto your USB drive, pull them from the USB drive and load them onto the actual micro SD card of the build. So what's happening right now is it's just literally copying all the data from the USB drive, and it's going to load it onto the internal storage. Once it's all said and done and it's ready and safe to be removed in terms of your USB, you take your USB out and you no longer need to have that USB drive to play those games. They will be transferred onto the internal storage of the micro SD card, and you're good to go that way. This is just a very long process. One thing I didn't quite understand why the developers did was that they've provided all the image files as PNG format, which is totally fine. PNG works, JPEG also works for the artwork. The problem is that it automatically converts any PNG files into JPEG anyways, and that's just an extra step that takes a lot of extra time when you're doing the initial install process. I know it's kind of like a nitpicky problem, but I would have preferred to see them include all the artwork as JPEG ready to go, just so that way you could cut down on this initial install time, probably by like 30-40%. So that's my main gripe with the install, but other than that, it's really simple, nice and easy. Again, the important thing is that you've got all your directories created properly, and all of your image files match the name of the ROM. But that's more or less it. This is it. It's just going to run through its thing. It's got to copy everything over, and you are pretty much good to go when that's done. So rather than sit here and talk to you for 15 minutes while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, and I will talk to you guys in a second once we are back onto the main screen of the console. All right, guys. So as you can see, the file transfers have finally completed. We got a nice little BLAST16 splash screen, and here we are into the actual build. So before I go ahead and talk about the build at all, I do want to mention and make note that you cannot load more than 600 games right now onto the build, otherwise you end up crashing the build. So just full disclosure, if you're going to be loading up a bunch of games on here, and you've got Game Gear, and you want to throw on Sega CD games, and you want to throw on a bunch of different games, make sure that you're not going over the 600 game limit. Otherwise, you will end up with problems with it crashing. So I'm sure that's something that's going to be addressed in future builds and future updates. But just to give you guys a heads up, I ended up loading about 570 games, 580 games that are specifically Genesis on here. But again, if you're going to be building it, don't go more than 600. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's take a peek at this build. You can see right away it's absolutely stunning to the eyes. The build itself, the artwork and the graphic work that they've done really looks just like you would expect for Genesis. And to be completely honest, if this were an official product from Sega, this is exactly what I would expect. I absolutely love it. The other thing I'm going to mention as well is that the background, as you can see, it's changing colors, going from blue to purple to pink, and then kind of going through that cycle. It looks really nice. It's got the nice motion in the background, which you don't really see very often on the Raspberry Pi RetroPie or emulation station builds. I think they've just done a really good job with the aesthetics of it. Now, as you can see, I've got all of the games loaded up onto here, and one of my biggest gripes with the build is that there isn't a really solid sorting system. So if I want to go from letter A, but I want to play a Sonic game that's all the way in letter S, I literally have to just scroll all the way through all of my 560 games to get to the S section, and that does take a while. I would have loved to see them implement some sort of system where you can skip by letter. So if you're in letter A, you can just press a button, it'll jump to B to C to E, or to D to E, and then all the way through the alphabet, just to jump through and get to the section that you want quicker. This will become a big problem as you can load up more than 600 games, and you put on all your different consoles as well. So if you've got Sega CD games and Game Gear games and Mega Drive games, they're all going to kind of be mixed in together, and it's just going to create a giant list for you to filter through. Now, I do appreciate that they've included a favorite system. So the favorite system is, you can see on the bottom, you've got press A button to play, B button to load, and B is just your save states. But the C button is your favorites. So if there are a bunch of games, for example, that you like, if you press the C button, it'll add that little star on the bottom underneath the game to indicate that that's a favorite. And I'm just going to throw 4 titles on here. If you press the up button or the down button on the D-pad, it'll take you to your favorite section. And right within your favorite section, it'll have all the games you've selected. And if you don't want them on there, you can press the C button to remove them again. So you can end up removing games right from there, which is nice. And then if you press the up or down button again, it'll take you back to your main build, your main menu with all of your games. What I would like to see in future builds is that if you press the up button, it'll take you to favorites. If you press the up button again, it'll filter by console. So you can go with just Mega Drive games, press up again, it'll be Game Gear, press up again, it'll be Sega CD, press up again, it'll be the Master System, and then you'll have, for example, one more section that'll have just all of the games displayed kind of the way it is. I think that would be really nice, really helpful, and just make navigating through the menus much easier. I can certainly see these developers building themed versions of this for different consoles. So Super Nintendo, Game Boy, things like that. I just think that would be really cool. And to see something like this put onto any of the other retro flag consoles, or for example the new the GPi Case that's coming out this week. That would be really cool to see. So definitely kudos to the developers. They've done a fantastic job. But now, other than that, I mean, aesthetically it looks really nice. But what's nice about it is you can do pretty much anything you want right on the console. So if we go ahead and press our start button, we've got our settings. We're going to enter our settings. You've got general and emulation. Let's look at general. And here you've got things like change the language. So do you want it to be in Spanish? Do you want it to be in French? Do you want it to be in Dutch? We're going to leave it as English for obvious reasons, but you have all of those options right here. Alternatively, you also have the logo. So as you can see on the top, I've got the European style Mega Drive logo, and I can change it to the Japan style, I can change it to the USA, and I can even change it to the Brazilian style. So I'm going to leave it at the US just because that is the region in which I am, and alternatively, you can also change your music on, off. If you like the music, and I'll be quiet for a second so you can hear it. So your music is there. You can turn it off altogether, and what that's going to do is it's just going to simply remove the music, and then you'll have nothing in the background. You can also change the music, so there is in the instruction manual the instructions as to what you need to label the music file as. You throw the music file onto your USB drive, pop it into it, turn off your console, turn it back on, and it'll grab that music file and replace the existing one. So you can actually fully customize the music to anything you want, which is a really nice feature as well. Then if we go into our emulation settings, you've got a bunch of different things like auto load. You can change the core. You've got Genesis Plus GX. You've also got the Pico drive. I like Genesis Plus GX personally. Then you've got things like your filters and your scales. So if you want a bilinear filter, you can turn that on. If you want scan lines, you can turn it on. If you want a TV filter, you can turn it on. And then you have a frame. If we go into frame, what this allows you to do is add the extra bars along the side that kind of fill up the space on an HD TV. As we all know, Genesis doesn't run in 16:9 resolution. It's a 4:3 scale, so you're going to have those bars. This just kind of fills in the space. And you've got a few different options. I'm going to leave it on the BLAST16 Blue. I just like that one the best. Then if we go back, you've also got input, which is where you can change the button configuration, and then you've got tools. So here you can actually delete games right from the console, right on the operating system, which is really nice. So if you wanted to delete a game, you'll select that. It'll ask you what game you want. You just hover over to it, press A to delete it, and you're gone. You've got backup and restore. So if you want to back up your build, and then you can restore it as well. So you would need an external USB drive to back up and to restore. But that's all there, ready to go right on the build. Next, you've got resizing the box art, you've got opening up RetroArch, and you've got the command line. So that's pretty much it there. Then you've got a help option, which will populate a QR code that you can scan on your phone, and that'll take you into the help section of their website. You've got credits, which is just going to give you all the information about all of the developers and who they are. So big shout out to Tripware and everyone else who's put some energy and effort into this. You guys have done a fantastic job, and it is absolutely amazing that you guys have put this out there. This is really nice to see something different than your standard emulation station builds or RetroPie builds. It's just nice to have options. So this is really cool. Thank you guys for doing that. Then you've got your reboot and shutdown. That's great if you don't have a MegaPi Case, because now you've got the proper reboot and shutdown settings on here. If you do have that MegaPi Case, as I said, you can just press the power button. The scripts are preloaded, and it will properly shut down or reboot your build the way it's supposed to be done without damaging or corrupting your SD card. I guess all that's really left to do is to load up a game and check it out, and then show you guys how the hotkey buttons work to get in and out of games and get back to your main menu. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a game like Sonic. It'll just take me 25 minutes to scroll over to the S section, so bear with me here. We're almost there, guys. We're about halfway. And this is exactly what I meant when I said that they need some sort of system to jump around within this list of games, because it's just going to take an incredibly painful amount of time to go from one end of the spectrum over to the other. So now we're in the P's, we're almost in the S's. R's. Now we're in the S's, now we just got to find our Sonic. There's Sonic's. Okay, so I'm going to load up Sonic the Hedgehog 2. We've got our BLAST16 logo in the bottom corner, which is a really nice touch. And here we are. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the game. The emulation is really good. It's exactly what you would expect. You're using cores that we're all familiar with. We know the emulation is tight on it. We know that the Raspberry Pi is more than capable of emulating Genesis. So as you can see, it looks and feels quite good. It runs really well, and there's definitely no complaints in terms of emulation. This is what we would expect from the Genesis Mini that's going to be coming out. It needs to have flawless emulation. Just because there's so many devices on the market that can already emulate really, really well. If Sega can't do that right, they're going to have a problem, but I'm not really anticipating any problems from there. Just a quick pointer in terms of when you're actually in the game. You've got your hotkey, just like you would with any other RetroPie or emulation station build. In this case, I'm actually using a RetroFlag SNES controller, just because I don't have access to a Sega replica controller. But if you did, you would press the mode button as your select, which would also likely be your hotkey. And you can change that. But in my case, I'm pressing the select button and the A button, which is going to save a save state. And then if I move over here, I'm just going to go ahead and load my save state that I just saved. So that's the select button or my hotkey button and the B button, which will load it, which is great. And then to exit a game is the same thing. You're going to hold the select button, or I guess your hotkey button, and the C button, which will exit. You can press select and start, which will take you to your RetroArch menu. But if you do that and you close the content from there, you actually have to exit RetroArch to get back to the main menu. That's not what we want to do. So if we press the hotkey button and the C button, it'll actually kick us out of the game and load up the main menu. So one thing I'm going to mention is it does take a long time. I don't know if it's just my build, the SD card that I'm using, or if there's maybe a different setting that I haven't set to. But I've noticed that took about 15 to 20 seconds to fully exit the game and get back to the main menu. That's not ideal. I don't know if that's an optimization issue, or if again that's something maybe I've done, or I'm using an SD card that's not quite as compatible. In my case, I'm using a really high-end 32 gig Kingston micro SD card. I don't think it's the SD card that's the problem. That being said, it could be. There could be something else that I don't have set. I'm still relatively new to this build, so I can't say for sure what it is, but that's just something as well. I think that if it is common, then the developers need a little bit of optimization on that as well. But other than that, the build is fantastic. It looks sharp. The games run well. It displays really good. I would like better filtering options, but I mean, that's a nitpicky thing. But other than that, it's really well done. So kudos to the developers. If you guys have a MegaPi case, or you don't have a MegaPi case, I'll leave links in the description down below for you to pick one up, as well as some recommended links for Raspberry Pis and anything else that you're going to need to get this build up and running. But if you have all of that stuff at home, definitely give this build a shot. It is absolutely fantastic, and it's really nice to see something different than the stock emulation station stuff that we see everywhere when it comes down to Raspberry Pi gaming. So definitely really cool. That's all I've got for this video though. Thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.